There is a proposal that is getting very little attention because it's not time yet. They're just kind of softening the earth. It's called the Democracy Restoration Act of 2009. Wow, it sounds patriotic, doesn't it? So what's the act? It's a proposal to restore voting rights of up to 4 million released felons. Now, here's the opening salvo from Sunday's New York Times editorial. Millions of ex-offenders who have been released from prison are denied the right to vote. That undercuts effort to reintegrate former prisoners into mainstream society. And it goes against one of democracy's most fundamental principles, that the government should rule with the consent of the governed. I can't believe they did this on the day they voted for health care. Goes against the fundamental principles of democracy? Maybe. What about the republic? With your rights come responsibilities. You must abide by certain rules and laws, and when you break them, you lose certain rights. Now, let me ask the New York Times. You're saying that we should restore, because you've paid your dues, you're going to restore the rights. All of them? Are you going to restore their right for the Second Amendment? Or is it only the voting rights? That's disenfranchisement, isn't it? You see, when the progressives are involved and votes are at stake, oh. And who do you suppose would be the beneficiary of the vast majority of ex-con votes, Democrats or Republican? Currently, about 4 million Americans have been released from prison, and they have been disenfranchised in federal elections by laws barring people with felony convictions from voting. Wow, disenfranchised. There's that word. It keeps popping up. So now we have a new class of victims. Let's take a look at the coalition that Barack Obama and his allies are working to put together. And I want you to think about this carefully, because this is what changes everything. This is, they always talk about Hugo Chavez as a democratically elected president. You'll always hear Sean Penn say that. Let's look at this coalition here. We have convicted felons. They want to restore that. That's 5 million votes. We have the ultra-radical left. You know they've got them. In fact, they just signed in that abortion waiver. That ain't gonna. That executive order. That's not going to stand. That's not going to stand. And don't fight for it, because if you do, and that stands, then the president can overturn law with a stroke of a pen. That's a dictatorship. So they have convicted felons, the ultra-radical left. Then you also have people that are now enslaved by government assistance, and you have government employees. I count those people as enslaved to government assistance, also the employees of the federal government. Then they also have now nearly all African Americans. Barack Obama won 95% of the vote in the last election. It won't be that high now, but African Americans are lockstep. They now have also lockstep the unions. Who else are they going after? After you have this, who else do you need? The pot at the end of the rainbow, just full of gold. Making voting citizens out of nearly 11 to 25 million illegal aliens already in the country. We don't really know how many people are here. Last election, Obama received 67% of the Hispanic vote. Now, can you imagine if the Democrats could successfully lock up another voting bloc of, let's say, the low end, 11 million people? This is not lost on the Obama administration and John Podesta for the Center for American Progress. They published this massive book, but George Soros has a lot of money. Change for America. It's a progressive blueprint for the 44th president. In it, they detail all of the details of the demographics and how to exploit them. Podesta writes that although the ideas are expressed here reflect a progressive viewpoint, I had hoped that the recommendations would be useful and instructive regardless of who was elected to be our 44th president. To be fair, we all know that these statistics on our changing demographics weren't lost on George Bush. No one was friendlier to the cause of illegal aliens than George W. Bush. I mean, we all know that. Was the Hispanic voting bloc the reason that he didn't secure the border? Probably, but the guy couldn't articulate it at all. People said, well, wait a minute, I don't care about politics. I thought we talked about values and principles and keeping us safe. What I do know is that the moral views of minorities, whether black or Hispanic, the values of conservatives are far more in line with conservatives than of liberals. Like the overall population, African Americans are more likely to describe their political ideology as conservative than liberal. Look at that. 61% of African Americans feel that there have been too few expressions of faith by political leaders. Nearly two-thirds of African Americans, 64%, say they oppose gay marriage. How is it that 95% of all blacks voted for Barack Obama? How is it that 67% of Hispanics voted for Democrats? For that matter, liberals and progressives continually try to sabotage our relationship with the Israelis. How is it that 78% of the Jewish vote went to Barack Obama? How did that happen? I'll tell you next and why it's important to understand it. Tonight we are showing you that progressives are putting together a voting coalition that will virtually make Republicans in national office extinct, or anybody extinct that is not a progressive. As we talked about before the break, why do the Democrats have the minority vote? When the values of African Americans and Hispanics are more aligned with those of the conservatives, why? Because the Democrats are very good at articulating things. They're very good. They're very good. They've played it this way. They've made a case for these voters on feelings, using Saul Alinsky tactics. They have marginalized conservatives by positioning them as racist haters. They're doing it now. Why do you think the Tea Party, why do you think it's all about race? And along the way, it has been forgotten in our country that Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. It has been forgotten that progressive Democrat Woodrow Wilson was one of the biggest racists I have ever seen. Read about this guy. The progressives, I mean, Margaret Sanger was trying to wipe out the African American. That's your Planned Parenthood for you. This guy, he reinstituted segregation. Listen to me, what I said? Reinstituted segregation in the military. Did you know that? We didn't have segregation until a progressive got into the office. Things like Senate Democrats, like former Klansman Robert Byrd, who organized a record filibuster against the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That was a Democrat. He's still in office. It was a Republican minority leader, Everett Dirksen, who fought hard for the passage. I've never even seen a picture of this guy, have you? There is no way African Americans should be married to the Democratic Party, or Hispanics for that matter. I personally don't think we should be married to any party. Let's just judge them on what's happening today. What are you doing today? But unfortunately, I think this is what's going to happen to our country's estimated 11 million illegal immigrants, and then it is lights out, gang. They are going to continue to use their community organizing groups to further embed themselves and ingratiate themselves with these new groups that I personally think they have forced into hiding. It is modern-day slavery, what we have going on in our country, with illegals living in the shadows and working for these corporations and being excused by our federal government. It is modern-day slavery. Now, you have groups like Acorn doing the bidding of the Obama administration and the Democratic Party, knocking on the doors. Don't fall for the silly ruse that Acorn, by the way, is out of business. I can't take it anymore. The press keeps reporting that they're going out of business. They're bankrupt. Really? Are they? Who would have seen that coming besides this program about a year ago? And I said they're going to be driving away from those buildings, and you got to watch where the car is going, because Acorn is just an empty shell. Well, listen to how Bertha Lewis, the head of New York's Acorn, listen to how she described what's happening at Acorn on NPR this week.
We are transforming, of course. I've been transforming this organization since June of 2008. And yes, we've had our financial woes. And yes, we are fighting an unconstitutional ban on any government funding. And again, it is unconstitutional, but we're transforming.
It's a fundamental transformation of Acorn. It doesn't get any clearer than that. It's a shell game. Everything that we have in this country now is a shell game. Oh, you don't want to call it, you don't want to call it a stimulus bill, call it a jobs bill. But nothing changes. So we know that we have rampant corruption in our government. The question is,